Hey all, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about something very quick. It's not going to be filled with a bunch of stats and such. It was just a case of like noticing what LeBron James did yesterday, and everyone's like saying like how many points he's averaging at the age he's at, and the question comes down to like who do you think is the greatest of all time? Now, personally, me of course, because the fact is that I've been with I grew up in the generation of the 90s and 80s, basically. Having witnessed, uh, Kareem, Barkley, of course, as well as, like the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson era, as well as, Isaiah Thomas, as well as Dominique Wilkins. I thought, look, those are the superstars right there. And then, and Patrick Ewing, of course, too, and Karl Malone, etc. And then of course his Ernest Jordan. That like it's always for me, it was always in my mind of like Jordan being the greatest basketball player of all time, NBA player of all time, basically. But the question is like if we're measuring out points and such, as well as championships by certain ages and all that stuff. I mean, it's a question of like I don't know what you can determine because if we're determining by age, I like how well people are at their certain age. Like I mean, Kareem has like he's the leading scorer of all time, of course, which James is probably going to break by the end of the season, or most likely at the beginning of next season, but most likely at the end of this season. The thing is basically this aspect is um, LeBron has four championships. Now, of the four, three of them, of course, came with superstars surrounded with them, basically. Whereas that one with Cleveland, I mean, so the question is like, how good is LeBron? If you were to compare LeBron to Michael Jordan, the thing is like, it's hard to determine because the fact is I mean, each player was in a different era, so that's very hard to determine. It's like basically saying during Michael Jordan, everyone thought it's got to be basically Dr. J or Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and like comparing to Jordan. But then of course Jordan beat out Bird and Johnson, so you know full well that he was much better than them. But then the question came down to was Jordan versus Bill Russell because like Bill Russell was the best at his point in time until during the 80s when Magic and Bird came in basically, and then everyone started talking like, all right, maybe Bill Russell wasn't that great because Bill Russell fundamentally was good skills wise and like surrounding his teammates and making his teammates better and such. Whereas Bird and Johnson, Magic, basically they made the NBA practically what it is today. And of course, Michael Jordan elevated it to to heights that can't be seen at this point. Like every sport wishes they could have someone that could elevate their sport to that level. Basically, the question is, has LeBron done that with the NBA? I don't think so. It's more of he's riding the coattails of Jordan, it seems, as well too, and a little bit of Kobe Bryant too. Unless there's another player that excites everyone dramatically, it's going to be a little tricky, basically. And the thing is like nowadays it's the age of super teams more than anything else. Like you have to have super teams basically to win championships. Whereas back in the day, you didn't have as much. I mean, yeah, you had all stars and superstars that were on that team. So the question comes down to is Jordan was surrounded with some really good players. And the real question comes down to is Jordan, was having problems, but the thing was is like if not for Scottie Pippen, would he have these championship rings? That's the real question because like we know Scottie Pippen was unbelievably good. The question is now if Scottie Pippen wasn't there, would Jordan be where would Jordan have all those six rings? That's a debatable question. I mean, like after Jordan retired and then came back to the Washington Wizards, you saw that the Wizards were pretty much mediocre. Now, granted, Jordan, yeah, he was much older, far past his prime, but LeBron still, at the age of 38, is still able to basically push it and score. Um, the same thing with Bill Russell. I mean, Bill Russell was able to, if we're going by championships alone, like Bill Russell has 11 right there, 11. I mean, if we're defining by the championships, then Bill Russell should be the greatest of all time because the fact is he has 11 championships. Plus, he made a lot of his players much better around him, and he didn't have as many superstars. I mean, yeah, he had Bob Cousy, but well, he did have Bob Cousy, of course. So in that situation, he did have another superstar with him. LeBron couldn't do it on his own in his initial stint with Cleveland, and then went off to Miami, and he needed two other stars, one superstar, which is Wayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, which was on the cusp of superstardom, but it was more of like an elite all-star more than anything else. It seems like. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean that's debatable for people to debate about that as well too. And then, of course, when LeBron came to the Lakers, I mean, you had KD. I mean AD. Sorry, Anthony Davis. AD, not KD. Anthony Davis. Without Anthony Davis, would they have had those championships? Or would they had that championship with AD? It's hard to say. I mean, it was during the bubble. Things were like a little mixed up. Like a little influx. So it's hard to say. Whereas when LeBron went back to Cleveland from Miami, I mean, that first year they went to the finals, or second year, I keep forgetting. In one of those 2 years, they went to the finals. Of course, they lost to the Golden State Warriors in 2015, and that was more of a case because the fact is like LeBron didn't have Kyrie Irving at that point. Like Kyrie Irving was injured, but he did keep it close, semi-close with Golden State, and then of course the next year around with Kyrie, they did really well, and that prompted Golden State, of course, to get KD to come on board at that point too. And KD, of course, won it with them that one, that following year. But of course, the question comes down to is, could Stephen Curry be considered a great as well too? Because I mean, would he have been able to win it without KD at that point, as well as with I forgot the shooting guard's name. Cracky. What's his name again? I think it's. Anyways, there's also the other guy too. Oh, nuts! I forgot that guy's name as well too. To be honest with you, it's Green, and oh man, I forgot. Damon Green was the other one or other person, but who's the other one? Goes to show he's not that like how great he is, but at the same time, is like he is still like up there. Like when he's not playing, it's an issue at that point. I mean, honestly, I mean now you got Jordan Peele, of course, too, and Iguodala is back as well too, but Klay Thompson. So the question is without Klay and Green, how good would Steph be at this point? I mean, it's hard to say. Like nowadays, you need an all-star with you, or a superstar, or one superstar, or at least a couple of all-stars surrounding you, basically. And we saw that, as we saw with Michael Jordan. He couldn't do it without Pippen. LeBron couldn't do it without Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade couldn't do it without Shaq. Now, the same things someone could say is like, bring up the point of like, well, look at Kobe. I mean, Kobe won without a superstar. Yes, but he had an all-star with Paul Gasol. So, like, Gasol was still there. He was still an all-star. And it was shown, like, without Gasol, like, Kobe Bryant couldn't do anything at that point either. Like, he couldn't get him as high into the playoffs at that point, too. So, like, let's be blunt. Without that complimentary, the Robin to you being the Batman, you wouldn't go that far. And so, like, Scottie Pippen will always be known as the Robin to, Michael Jordan being the Batman. You have Larry Bird, McHale and Parrish, John Magic Johnson with Worthy, Scott, Green, AC Green a little bit here there, and also let's not forget Jabbar early on as well too, and Bill Russell, Bob Cousy. I mean, honestly, I think the one person we could say that was really good enough was probably, let's not forget Tim Duncan, man. I mean, Tim Duncan has 5 championship rings, or 5 or 6 championship rings. I can't remember exactly how many. Alexa, how many championship rings does Tim Duncan have?
Tim Duncan won 5 NBA championships.
5 NBA championships. So, I mean, he did it with, the first one, of course, he had David Robinson. Then the other remaining 4, he had to do with Parker and Manu Ginobili. I forgot how to pronounce his name. The Argentinian, basically. I mean, without them, could Tim Duncan have won it, basically? I mean, that one year he did practically do it on his own, practically against the Nets. So let's not forget that. But the question comes down to, again, who is the greatest? Like I said, I can't give you numbers because it's hard to determine numbers because each era it's defined by its own set of players. I mean, LeBron is had so many players, but the thing is question comes down to could LeBron have survived, or could LeBron be LeBron if he was transplanted into the 90s, where it's like in the 80s, basically, where it's all purely physical, and the fouls weren't as loose as they were in the 80s and 90s, basically, where like in the 80s and 90s, you can play dirty a little bit and, and still shoot up. Whereas if you if you clothesline LeBron, you're automatically ejected. You get suspended. So no one's going to clothesline. Whereas back in the 80s and 90s, you can clothesline someone. It's a foul. Maybe possibly technical, but you're not ejected from a game or anything like that. So I mean, and like you got the bad news Detroit Pistons and of course the Knicks defense. So like the fact that Jordan had to beat those two and like did really well against them was really, like it shows. So the real question is, can you come back to that? And like, if that style of error was to be brought back again, granted, it's not as exciting, but at the same time, it can prove your worth at that point, like how good you are. The question is like, it's all relative, of course, to that period of time. But again, bringing, like Kobe, he was kind of in that middle a little bit, but he wasn't that great. Whereas Shaq showed otherwise, like he was that person that played in that style a little bit. Granted, yeah, the rules changed a little bit during his period at that point where it came to the point where like fouls were a little bit more used, like as far as more touching and such. I mean, they changed the game to make it more offensively minded than defensive actually. So like the question is like, could Shaq, I mean Shaq most likely would have definitely thrived in the 80s and 90s for sure. He would have definitely thrived in the 80s and 90s. Question is, could Kobe have thrived at that point? No one knows honestly, because just like LeBron, they've never had that physicality basically where you had Barkley like could just like bump you in like whatever it is, or Karl Malone like shoving you out or whatever, or the bad news Pistons basically. Same thing with the like all the other players right now this day and age basically, like Giannis. Everyone's saying Giannis is unbelievably good. Question is, would he have thrived at that period of time? Chances are not. But of course, as the game evolves, the individual has to evolve, and then if you evolve, you become you become that good of a player as a result of evolution. If you can evolve and adapt, that's the whole thing. So it's hard to say who would be the greatest based on the the time era. I mean, Jordan said it. Yeah, actually, Jordan said it correctly basically, or Jordan put it the way that I think we should take into account. Basically, he never compared himself to everyone. Like, is he the greatest of all time? Because the thing is, like, he might have been great during that period of time, but comparing himself to other players and those different eras, he can't do that. He refused to do that because he doesn't know. It's just LeBron though is one of those things like he wants to say I'm the greatest of all time, but in reality he can't compare himself to Jordan. There's always going to be that debate. If LeBron versus Jordan, who would be the better of the two? Who is the greatest of the two? And then you bring up Bill Russell, like of the three, who's the greatest of that point? At that point too, no one really knows because the thing is like let's not forget. LeBron didn't make all his players surround all his players and made him better. At least Jordan and everyone else did make his player, like all his teammates much better. If LeBron had made his teammates better, you would see the Lakers not doing what they're at right now. They wouldn't be where they're at right now. And quite honestly, if LeBron had won a championship with Cleveland initially before going to Miami, like if he never went to Miami and had won it in Cleveland, I think you could consider him right then and there the greatest because of the fact that he was able to do it without like a superstar. He might have had a Robin and Love, or even Irving for that matter, but in reality he didn't. He did it with Wade and Bosh, and the same thing with Wade too. Like Wade couldn't do it on his own. He needed another superstar, and he had Shaq the first time around, and then of course then he had LeBron. Shaq. Now the question is, could he do it on his own? It's hard to say because let's put it this way. When Shaq won the rings, he did it with Kobe and he did it with Dwayne Wade. So it's hard to determine that. I mean, he was a dominating factor, but he alone couldn't make the team not a championship team unless he had someone with him, basically. And that's what it is nowadays. It's like, and it's always going to be this case. You need that person with you, basically. You need that Robin, basically. But nowadays, it's not that Robin. Now you need a Superman and a Batman together just to win. You need that Batman and not Batman and Robin. Well, actually, what you need is basically a Batman, Superman, and Robin, basically, or Batman, Superman, and Green Lantern type of person, basically, or not. Sorry, not Green Lantern, but more. You need a Batman, Superman, and an Aquaman. I just say, but like that third person's going to have to be the Aquaman at that point. So the question is like during the period of the Golden State, you had Steph and KD. They were your Batman and Superman, and then you had Thompson, which was your Aquaman at that point. Same thing with LeBron and in Miami. LeBron and Wade were your Batman and Superman, and the Aquaman unfortunately was Chris Bosh in this case. And I don't think Chris Bosh will deny it. He's still a Justice Leaguer, still a powerful opponent, but not as powerful as these two basically. So I I probably could get more into in depth in detail, but ideally it'd be great if EA Sports or won some basketball video game analysis, or there's some kind of analysis that could take into all these uh, attributes of each player, and then see, like in a simulation, how well they would do. It'd be great to see how that would work. It's hard to determine that right now, honestly. Like you still have to account for quite a few things, but if you could account for these attributes and then how they would do in a uh, surrounding of basically each era and see how they would work in each era. That would be interesting to see as well too. I mean, quite honestly, I think Jordan probably would have been much better than Russell, because the fact is like there wasn't that much physicality, but at the same time, well, there was physicality, but the question is the fouls weren't as big back then during Russell's era than it was in the 80s. I mean, it's as time went on, started creating the Russell, that there's also the 3-point line that wasn't created, as well as the shot clock, etc. Basically, so it's amazing what Bill Russell did. But let's not forget Jordan. For me personally, as I'm always saying, being a child of the 80s, 90s, basically, born in the 70s, of course, but being a child of the 80s, 90s, it's more of a case where like seeing Jordan and witnessing Jordan and seeing how he played against two of the greats. Basically, I would say is like against, or three. Basically, you got Magic, Bird, Barkley, Malone with Stockton, and then and I hate to say this, but with Ewing as well too, and Clyde Drexler. I mean, it shows how good Jordan was, but he needed that Robin though at that point. So I would always still consider Jordan to be the best, bar none. But that's my opinion, of course. Let me know what you guys think. Who should be the greatest, and maybe if you do let me know, like maybe some reasons why, maybe if possible. But again, yeah, please leave a comment about it. And I do read my comments, and I'll try to comment to them, respond to them if which your player basically that you think is the greatest of all time. Or I might have missed some people basically. I mean, some have asked like, what would your be Mount Rushmore basketball players? I mean, of course it'd be Jordan, Bill Russell. Now the question is would it be Kobe and LeBron, or would it be or either or basically? But it would definitely be Russell and Jordan for sure. The question is like, does it come out to Bird and Magic Johnson and those two, or would you remove them and put in Kobe and LeBron, etc. Basically, I don't know. Like those are my two staples right there: Bill Russell and Michael Jordan. So the question I would always back in the day I would have said Bill Russell, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird. But now the way that LeBron and everyone else is playing nowadays, and the way Kobe did really as well too, is like, all right, maybe Magic goes up as well as Bird, and then you maybe bring in Kobe to replace Magic, and then maybe bring in LeBron to replace Bird, because those guys know how to light up players as well too. And defensively, if they knew how to play, I mean, they were defensively good as well too. The question is like defensively, how good is LeBron compared to like Larry Bird? It's hard to say, but Larry Bird, let's not forget, he was a really good defender. If LeBron had a lot of steals and reduced his turnovers, it'd be an impressive story too in and of itself. Because remember, let's not forget, Jordan had so many steals too at that point as well. So let's see what happens. Not let's see what happens, but let's see what your thoughts are, what your comments are about it. I mean, who would be in your Mount Rushmore basically? As I said, basically, it's Bill Russell, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron. I would say those are my four. Those are my four at that point. Outside of that, I'll let you guys. I'll let you guys go. Or not let you guys go, but I'm more of a case of like, please let me know your thoughts. Let me know your four Mount Rushmores, as well as who do you think is the greatest of all time and the greatest of all time NBA player, of course. And please subscribe as well too. And if you want, we can go in depth and detail but in detail with this as well too. And I know I've gone beyond my 15 minutes. It's 20 minutes, but this is a subject that's just going a little bit further than I anticipate. But again, my Mount Rushmores, as I told you, Jordan, Bill Russell, LeBron, and Kobe. Now with ranking, that's a whole different story. I can create another video for that. But outside of that, I'll leave it at that. And again, please subscribe. I do. And please leave a comment, of course, as well too. With that, I'll leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.